The trial of Amos Scott, Jamaica. Some people say that Jamaica is not a real place. But some people think that Jamaica and the culture was most recently developed. But let me tell you, it has been a tradition for many things that we see. And the trial of Amos Scott is a tale from Annotto Bay that gives an idea of what things were back in the 1930s. On the 1st of June, the quiet town of Annotto Bay was stirred by an incident that would lead to a dramatic trial. It all began the night before when Amos Scott, a resident of Top Bay, found himself in a quarrel with Daniel Dawkins and Alfred Clark, who had recently come to live in the same room as Scott and another lodger, called Catbirth. Now, let me tell you, in those days, people practically lived in the same room. Catbirth recounted the event that unfolded on the fateful night. I lived with the accused in August. Alfred Clark and George Dawkins also lived there. On the night of the 1st of June, I was in the room with Scott. We had a quarrel. I wanted to sleep on the floor, but he would not let me. He hit me and locked up the door. I stayed there whole night with him. Next morning, Clark threw a clothes iron at Scott, and Scott retaliated with a piece of iron. They were both armed and angry. The conflict escalated. Irene Scott, a washerwoman who lived next door, testified, "I saw Scott run around the house, and they threw bricks at him. Dawkins had a weapon in his hand and was standing on one side. Scott picked up a piece of iron and was fighting Dawkins. They went up the road and I heard someone cry that Amos had hit Dawkins." Julia Edwards, another washerwoman, described how the event unfolded. "I live in the same yard with Scott in August. I was coming from work on the morning of the 1st of June when I heard Clark ask Irene Brown if Scott and Hattie had had a fight that night. She said yes. Clark went away and got a stone and a clothes iron. He threw the stone at Scott. Scott ran behind an ackee tree and of course afterwards ran into the yard, into another yard, that is, Headley's yard. Clark and Dawkins chased after him and Scott threw a conch shell that hit Dawkins. Yes, it hit him somewhere in the head. James Huntley, a blacksmith who lived next door, added his perspective. On that morning of the 1st of June, Scott pitched out a fellow, and the fellow threw a piece of iron at Scott. Scott took up a piece of iron pipe too. Clark had a weapon. He didn't see that it was a dangerous weapon. Scott ran into the yard and picked up a shell, and as Dawkins was coming up towards him, he threw it and it hit him in his head. Dawkins fell to the ground and Scott ran away." The trial took place in the St. Mary's Circuit Court, presided over by Justice Clark, the prosecutor, led by Mr. P.S.W. Foster Sultan, presented witnesses who detailed the events leading to Dawkins' death. The defense, conducted by Mr. Albert Lindo, argued that Scott had acted in self-defense. Imagine someone chasing you and you get something. What would you do? Wouldn't you do the same? Constable Heron confirmed the critical evidence, producing the conch shell, of course. The conch shell was important, that Scott had used. David Young, the dispenser at the public hospital, testified about Dawkins' medical condition. Dawkins was admitted in June, discharged in August, readmitted in August, and died in September. After hearing the testimonies, the jury deliberated and returned a verdict. Amos Scott was acquitted of manslaughter, and it was determined that he had acted in self-defense during the chaotic confrontation. Mr. Clark praised the police of St. Mary and gave thanks, of course, to the Clerk of Courts for their diligent work. The case is a stark reminder of the turbulent events that can disrupt the most peaceful community. Sometimes I would say it's better to walk away than to stand. The man who fights and runs away, they say, lives to fight another day. But many think their pride is so big that they can't walk away, only to find themselves unconscious sometimes. And of course, they're unable to tell the tale because they are now 6 feet under. The revengeful nature of our population is not good because it has caused so many things. There's a saying in the country of Jamaica, if you can't catch Harry, you catch him short. But that's so wrong, because innocent people will die. I'm not saying that you should catch Harry or do anything else. But what I'm saying is, we need a justice system that will advocate for justice, because justice delayed sometimes is justice denied. That's the critical thought for this time.